to St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. By the way, we noted that you're getting increasingly interested in the forum. The number of publications this year, as well as the number of information materials on St. Petersburg Economic Forum increased in comparison to the previous year and several years before. We are delighted to note that progress, and we are maintaining good contacts with our partners in many areas, in many industry sectors. I've just had a very substantive meeting with the heads of the biggest world companies working in the fuel and energy sector. I believe that the session is coming to an end right now, and they are still discussing the energy situation in the world. They are sharing their ideas on what we could do to stabilize the world energy market. During the meeting, I also asked them to voice their offers to Russia to speak about what they could suggest in this area. In general, we are satisfied with the efforts that are taken in this area. Many of our partners have been working in Russia for a long time already. And they have high capitalization, which makes the access to financial markets even.
Some of the members of the Russian segment requested us that we further improve Russian legislation, including on fiscal issues, and we will discuss these matters in June. So, regarding today's session, we are really happy that you show your interest in working with us. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Mikhailov. ITER-TASS is marking a 110-year anniversary this year. This is a well-known brand. And I'm sure that under your guidance, ITER-TASS will open a new page in its history. As I understand, we have a very representative audience today. 80% of all the information flows go through your media outlets, so you have a huge sway over the information space. So you have some key influence, and your newswires are later circulated by your partners on the internet and on television. I'm sure we'll be able to talk about some of the issues on how to work with the Russian agencies, government agencies, and with your partners on the Russian market. So that's enough for the introductory remark, and now let's move on to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll try to respond to them. You're welcome. Mr. Putin, thank you for the opportunity to come here today. And I think we should give the floor to France Press, an agency with almost 200-year anniversary, to the old-timers.
Monsieur le Président, vous allez bientôt aller en France pour la commémoration du 70e anniversaire du débarquement allié en Normandie. Est-ce que ce sera pour vous l'occasion d'avoir des entretiens séparés avec les chefs d'État qui seront présents? Et si je peux me permettre, puisque je suis la responsable de cette assemblée, j'ai le privilège d'ouvrir le bal de questions.
Meetings with the heads of state that are going to be present there. And if I'm allowed to say that, to ask you another question, Do you believe that the president that is going to be elected in the Ukraine
Первое,
is
что
a
касается
legitimate one?
поездки в Нормандию,
First,
она
regarding our visit to Normand,
будет ограничена
it
темой,
is going to be
ради которой мы все собираемся.
restricted to
Действительно,
the
президент
theme
Франции
of
подтвердил свое
the meeting,
приглашение.
and
И,
the
конечно, оно
French
благодарно
president
принято.
has
Во время
confirmed
Второй
his
мировой войны
invitation.
наши
During the
страны
Second
были в
World
одном
War,
строю, боролись с нацизмом.
we were allies,
И
and we were fighting together against Nazism.
народы Советского Союза и России
As you know very well, the peoples of the Soviet Union and the people of Russia had sacrificed a lot to win the war, to achieve our joint victory over Nazism. And that is why it is quite natural that we are going to have a meeting in Normandy,
нашим союзникам по коалиции.
and we are going to pay tribute to our coalition partners, to the British, the American, the French.
Участие
We remember
французов и
the contribution the French
прямом участии
had made to the resistance, and
войны, в том числе и
through their direct participation in the war,
будут
including the Normandy
встречи.
Neman.
Насколько я
And
понял,
speaking
президент
about
Франции хотел бы
the meetings that
встречу
could be held in that regard, as far as I understand, the French president wanted to have an additional meeting to be able to discuss the bilateral issues and issues related to the international agenda. Of course, I am open to any negotiations, and if the schedule of the French president allows that, I'll be delighted to meet him and to discuss the issues of mutual interest.
Вторая часть
This
вопроса
is
касается признания
the answer for the first part of your question. And speaking about your second question, about whether the president elected in the Ukraine is going to be legitimate, I gave a very detailed answer to that question yesterday. You know, one of your colleagues questioned me
Я уже сказал,
very precisely and thoroughly on the issue. I said everything yesterday, but I can repeat that, in my view, it would be much more logical first to deliver on the agreements that were reached on February 21 of the year between the president and the opposition. And I suppose that we should not doubt the very legitimacy from the future, the very legitimacy of the future government of the Ukraine from the very beginning. But an obvious fact is that it is illegitimate to hold presidential elections when there is an acting president of the Ukraine. And it is enshrined in the constitution of the Ukraine. I suppose that first they would have to hold a referendum and then probably to adopt another constitution or another basic government act. But at the moment, the government of the Ukraine, the people who are in power in the Ukraine at the moment, they want to hold the elections first and to implement changes. What changes they are going to implement is an open question, because it is always a subject to discussion, and it should be discussed and talked about in the society. What I'm thinking about is that people who are now in power in Kiev and the main candidates for the position of the president are different people. And maybe those who are in power are not interested in electing a legitimate president. And we should take into account the internal political struggle that is underway in the Ukraine. Well, anyway, it is mostly related to Ukraine's domestic affairs. What I'd like to emphasize is that we'll treat any choice of the Ukrainian people with due respect.
Pardon, donc si je vous comprends bien, pour vous, le président légitime restera le président Yanukovych, même après l'élection.
If I understood you correctly, you believe that Mr. Yanukovych is the legitimate president of the Ukraine, and he will remain the legitimate president even after the election. I suppose that all of us can read very well. We can just open the Ukrainian constitution and read the text. We are adults. We can read. Just open the constitution of the Ukraine and read it. In the constitution there are 4 legal ways enshrined, including death, the incapacity to fulfill the presidential obligation, the impeachment procedure, enshrined in the Constitution as well, and personal resignment. These are 4 ways when the president stops being legitimate in his office. I suppose that we should either stick to constitutional norms or say that they are not important at all. But my position is that first we have to address this issue. But given that people who are in power in Kiev today decided to take a different course of action, let it be their way. But we believe that we have to create the favorable conditions for stabilizing the situation, because at the moment what they do means that they are going to adopt a new constitution, and then maybe the president that is going to be elected now will be just a transitional figure, or on the opposite, the president might be trying to concentrate all the resources. I suppose that both scenarios could lead to aggravation of the political struggle within the country. As I've already said, we are going to treat the choice of the Ukrainian people with due respect, and we are going to work with the authorities that are going to be shaped based on the elections. Now I'd like to give the floor to our colleagues from Xinhua. It means New China in Russian. Excuse me, are you satisfied with the answer I gave? Yes, I am. Thank you. First, my congratulations on the very successful negotiations with Xi Jinping. The joint statement that was adopted says that you've reached a new level in our relations. My question is how the Russian-Chinese relations can play, as you put it, a bigger role in stabilizing the relations and the development of both countries. My second question is as follows. Do you believe that the 70th anniversary of the victory in the Second World War, what is the role of this event in today's situation, and how can we celebrate it? The results of our meeting in Shanghai that took place several days ago, and the documents we signed speak for themselves. There is a new quality to the relations between Russia and China. During the recent years, we have repeatedly emphasized that our relations are at a very high level. During my stay in China, when we came to the agreements that you've just mentioned, mean that we've reached a new level in our relations, that our dialogue is indeed based on trust and confidence. And it is also a new level of our strategic partnership. It is not only related to the gas contract that was signed. Many experts say that it is a landmark in the history of our relations. In our view, it is compatible to the decision that was taken in the 60s by Russia and Germany. I am referring to very important contract, a well-known contract, gas in exchange to the pipes. At the moment, we produce pipes ourselves, including the big diameter pipes. But for us, the contract with China means an opportunity to access the Asia-Pacific region, the Asian market. And if we have a contract as big as this, which amounts to $400 billion, allows us to make the development of the energy infrastructure in the whole Far East and the Eastern Siberia economically profitable. And that is what means a lot to the Russian Federation. I suppose that for the People's Republic of China, it makes possible decreasing the deficiency of energy resources And, as I mentioned yesterday, we feel that the heads of the state are concerned with the environmental situation in big cities. As we all know, natural gas is the most environment-friendly energy source. And we do hope that our cooperation will help to protect the environment in the big Chinese cities. However, our next step could be signing a similar agreement on the so-called Western route. Our first contract was on the Eastern route, and the second one is going to be related to the Western route. First, we are going to use the formations Kavikta and Chenda, where there is 3 trillion cubic meters of gas that could be recovered, and I suppose that they are sufficient for 30 years, and in our assessments, even to 50 years. And speaking about the Western route, we are going to use the resources from other formations. We are going to use the Western Siberia resources for that. The second project is going to be cheaper. And given that the pricing issues and the aspects related to targeting the projects on both sides are going to be functioning very well already, the second project, if it is supported by both Russia and China, is going to be implemented even faster than the Eastern one. But, of course, it depends on the order's will, on China's needs regarding the development of the infrastructure.
But it's not limited to energy, or at least not hydrocarbons. We continue discussions on nuclear, new renewable types of energy, alternative sources that are very promising. That's great importance to cooperation in high-tech areas, be that aviation, outer space exploration, medicine. Both for China and Russia, monetary, financial, currency cooperation are very important. Both Russia and China hold huge golden currency reserves, as we all know. China ranks #1 in terms of its golden currency reserves globally. For us, it's important to place our golden currency reserves in a rational, reasonable, safe way. So we both need to think of the best way to do that, taking into account turbulent scenarios still going on in the global economy. We need to rationally use our resources. Then settlement in national currencies, rubles and Chinese currency. First steps have been done. We'll continue working in the direction we spoke about, boosting cooperation in many sectors: agriculture, general commercial cooperation, regional partnership. We've advanced significantly along all of these lines. I'd like to highlight the personal engagement of Chairman Xi Jinping. It was very much thanks to his personal contribution, his personal support, that the positive outcomes of the visit were possible. Thank you. Next,
хорошо вам известно, агентство ДПА, 95% информационного рынка Германии, все немецкие газеты ежедневно являются подписчиками
Germany. 95% of news goes through this news agency. 100% is more like it, and we're very proud of it. I'll try to speak Russian. I appreciate the opportunity to take part in the meeting in the West, in Germany in particular. Many have questions about the policy and reliability of our partnership, about confidence. We spoke a lot about confidence during the forum, talking about gas. Gas is the main area of cooperation between Russia and Germany. Will there be enough gas left for the West now that Russia signed a major contract with China? Could you elaborate on what that might mean for other projects, South Stream, other lines of North Stream, etc.? Will they still be relevant, or are they no longer on top of the agenda? And my second question is, we spoke about Ukraine already. I would like to hear your view on Russian-German relations in that respect. You often talk on the phone with Chancellor Merkel. How would you characterize the behavior of the German government in relation to the Ukrainian conflict? Let me start with the economy. When it comes to cooperation with Chinese friends and partners, European friends and partners, Germany in particular, after the contract with Chinese Republic is fulfilled, it's going to become an equal consumer of Russian gas, equal in volume to Germany. So we're talking about similar volumes. Germany uses about 40 billion cubic meters of our gas per annum, so will China eventually? In case the second project is implemented, the one I referred to just now, the Western route, China will become a strong leader. So the Eastern Corridor, the Eastern route, like I said, I want to make it very clear to everyone, it has nothing to do at all with Russian gas supplies to Europe. We're talking about new gas fields that are located in the south of Yakutia and in Irkutsk region. So far, they have not been used at all. We'll have to equip them, we'll have to drill, we'll have to build pipelines, all infrastructure, supply power, build roads. It's a major project. Like I said, it's going to be the largest construction project in the world, with a total investment amounting to about $55 billion only from Russia, while Chinese partners will have to invest about $20 billion. So this has nothing to do with Europe whatsoever. As regards the second route, which is still under discussion with our Chinese friends. No contracts have been signed so far. We're still at the discussion stage, although I think the decision will be taken. Well, for this project, resources will come from the Western Siberia, and all Europe, including Germany, gets Russian gas coming from Western Siberia. But here again, there's nothing to worry about, because today, I don't want to confuse details. Gazprom, I think, extracts 440, 450 billion cubic meters per year, while it is capable to raise production to 650 billion cubic meters. So there are enough resources. We haven't been using them in full, because for a simple reason, we did not have a consumer. But we can raise production dramatically, very rapidly. As regards volumes that will be supplying to China through the Western route, of course it's not, well, we have not agreed on a figure yet. It's not going to be 200 billion. But the increase by this 200 billion will have to cover the needs of China, growing needs of Western partners, and growing needs of the Russian economy. What's of special importance to us, like I said, as soon as we complete the Eastern project, we will be able to interconnect pipelines from the European part of Russia, Western Siberia, and Eastern Siberia in the Far East. And in that case, we would be able to transfer gas from one region of Russia into the other. Transfer gas from European and Far Eastern consumers, all consumers in the Asia-Pacific region. I think that would be an important factor in the global energy. Would help to deal with economic issues easier, not politicize them in any way. We talk a lot about reliability. Back in the Soviet days and the most dire days of the Cold War never disrupted supplies of energy to Europe. Germany is no exception. Russia did the same. The only negative example we had was the 2009 crisis with Ukraine, when it demanded that Russia, with no good reason, demanded that Russia reduce prices dramatically and later disrupted our supplies of gas to Ukraine. You can spread the word, you can silence it, and it happens often. It's up to you. But we are interested in supplying our raw materials to bona fide customers that pay contract price. Do you think we'd ever stop supplying gas to Europe? That would go against our own interests. That would be suicidal. But what is it we can do if Ukrainian partners seize gas instead of transporting it? The only thing we could do was stop supplying gas to them. Because, one has to pay for what he gets. So, the contract is now being questioned again. Signing a new contract was difficult, but you can find the text on the web. It's an open source. It's rather technical, but any literate man can read it and see with his own eyes that Russia is honoring all of its provisions. We haven't violated any single one. And now we hear that there are threats to damage the pipeline, or that there is risk they would refuse to pay. Refuse. They haven't been paying since July last year. Ukrainian partners stopped making regular payments July last year. Now we hear that we need to reduce gas prices. Why? Why must we? It's not in the contract. If we want to play by the market rules, we should honor contractual commitments. And this is what we do. I'm a realistic man. Back in the days, we gave a $100 discount out of 1,000 cubic meters. That was payment for the deployment of our fleet in the Crimea. Okay, someone may refuse to recognize that Crimea joined Russian Federation through democratic procedure, and for some reason refuses to acknowledge the right of the people of Crimea to self-determination. Let us not go deeper into that. But look at what happened. We were supposed to pay for the presence of Russian fleet in Crimea started in the year 2017, because before that date, the agreement between Russia and Ukraine was in effect, and we paid annually $95 million for the deployment of our fleet in Crimea. By the way, we already made a payment. We already made a payment for 2014. We paid the $95 million. And then after 2017, we'd have to deal with payment for the presence of our fleet. So we agreed that we're going to give them a discount, $100 per 1,000 cubic meters, and that this discount will cover the stay of our fleet. But we were not supposed to pay until the year 2017, while we started paying immediately back in 2010. Why? Because Ukrainian friends asked us to do so. They ask us
дополнительной
to
поддержки украинской экономики.
provide additional
И вот за
support
это
to the
время,
Ukrainian economy.
2017,
So
18, 19,
2017, 18, 19,
за это время с 10, 11, 12,
2010, 11, 12,
квартал
13, and first quarter of 14.
мы как бы платили за пребывание
We-
нашего флота в Крыму 3 с лишним года.
For 3.5 years, almost, we paid for the deployment of our fleet in the Crimea, while according to the agreements that were made, we were supposed to start paying in 2017, which means we already paid for the year 17, 18, 19, and the first quarter of 21st. But the trick is, and now it gets interesting, that the contract only is effective until 2019, while we have paid in advance for until 2021. So how can anyone reproach us? We've been so generous. We've shown true spirit of partnership when it comes to dealing with our Ukrainian friends. So, going to the second part, when we saw that last year the situation in the Ukrainian economy became completely devastating. Since July, like I said, despite very good relations we had with the former government, we stopped receiving any payments for them. In accordance with the contract clause, we could demand prepayment. And it says in the contract, should authorities fail to pay for the previous months, Russia is entitled to demand prepayment for every next month. So this is very simple. We demand money first and then we supply gas. We decided not to do that. We thought instead of losing a client, one has to help the client. So we waited and waited. August, September, October, November. And nothing happened. We got no money. Well, at best, partial payments. Then at some point they asked for additional assistance. First, they asked to provide them a loan, $3 billion at the first stage, to pay, to cover the indebtedness for the year 2013. And they said, it's difficult to pay even the low price we have now, so we're asking for an additional discount, an additional $100 discount, so it amounted to $268.5 per 1,000 cubic meters. And they said, if you give us the low price, we can guarantee that we'll pay you in full and timely. Gazprom did agree with partners. They said, okay, we'll do even that, but only provided you make regular monthly payments in full. We got the money in January, we got half of the money, or less than half, in February, and we got zero in March. Even with all the discounts, although the tariff was so low, then at that point new government took office. So we told them, come on, we agreed that unless you pay in full, we'll revoke all discounts. And this is what we did. I want to stress that it's not political. But we cannot supply our resources, our products, free of charge to a country that has 45 million population. Like I said yesterday at the session, we already supplied 9.8 billion cubic meters of gas to Ukraine, free of charge, free of charge. It's the amount we supply to Poland in 12 months. This is unprecedented. Today our partners tell us, we will not pay until you give us the discount back. Well, first, they don't have the right to demand a discount. The contract that is still in effect does not provide for any discounts. And secondly, we had an agreement. We will give you discounts only providing you make timely payments. But what I'm about to say, it's going to be even more surprising to you. We told the new authorities, okay, we understand you're in a difficult situation, we're ready to make a step forward, we're ready to discuss discounts, but at least you need to pay off the accumulated debt over the period while the discounts were still in effect, up to April 1st this year. You're asking for a low price. Pay us at least the accumulated debt over the period while you had all the discounts. Nope. They refuse to do that. Come on, there's a limit. There's a limit to everything. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes after election, after new government takes office. But under contract, the Gazprom already warned partners, and I'm telling this to you, not to be accused that we act as bandits. I sent a letter to many of my fellow leaders to whom we supply gas. Recently, I sent a second letter warning them that under contract, Gazprom is shifting to prepayment in settlements with Ukraine. Some of the European leaders told me, please be patient, wait a little while. Ukraine is about to get the first payment from the IMF, and they'll pay you immediately. But no, that didn't happen. They devoured our $3 billion without paying us a single penny. Now they get money from the IMF. We still see nothing. So we're prepared to engage in constructive dialogue, but we shouldn't use the language of ultimatums. We should be civilized. So when it comes to cooperation with Germany, we have extensive cooperation. They're also extremely important both for Russia and Germany. According to preliminary estimates, due to cooperation between the economies of our two countries, 300,000 jobs exist in Germany, and this is excluding energy cooperation. So I am and remain convinced that one has to be very cautious and not subject them to tests and trials of the current political situation, because it's hard to say who's right and who's wrong in those political disputes. I think we are right. As regards negotiations, contacts, we are in touch. I am in touch with Chancellor Merkel. I have, or at least had until now, very good personal relations with Chancellor Merkel. We were always able to find points of convergence, compromise, even on the most difficult questions, and we're determined to work in a similar fashion in the future. Thank you. Going back to Asia, Vladimir Vladimirovich, our Indian colleague, Major Indian agency, Mr. Chandra, who interviewed you a few years back. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have short questions on Ukraine related to India. The Indian government did not support the sanctions and other measures that the Western governments took. What is your reaction to that? Number two, we have a new government elected in India, and Mr. Narendra Modi was tweeted about Russia. Russia about his message that he got from you, and he tweeted about it. You were the first country he mentioned. So the Western countries had, US and the Western countries had some reservations about dealing with him. Now they are easing. What is your reaction on that? And number three, on Kudankulam nuclear power project, has all the issues been resolved on 3 and 4 units? The nuclear liability clause, has it been resolved with India? Thank you.
Well, the first, as far as the sanctions are concerned, you know my position. I believe that the sanctions are counterproductive and are not based on any fair treatment of the existing problems. They are dictated with the desire to impose such a development of international relations on Russia which does not correspond to the international law or to mutual interests or to Russian interests. And some events that took place in Ukraine are threatening our interests. First of all, security interests. I mean the prospects of Ukraine accessing the NATO, which can be followed, and I mentioned that, by not only the accession but also placing the military complexes in the Ukrainian territory and in Crimea. And if that happened, Russia de facto would have serious geopolitical consequences. De facto, it would be squeezed out from the Black Sea region, from the region where Russian fought for the presence there for many centuries, and those who provoked the coup d'etat in Kiev should have, if they are professionals, considered the implications of their illegal desires and aspirations. I hope that this would be the precedent which has its negative consequences, but which will revive goodwill and benevolent and fair treatment of the international law, and to agreeing the positions and taking into account the legal interests of each other during talks, and not through using force to solve disputable questions. And the support of the anti-constitutional coup d'etat is a solution by force of a disputable question. What happened? I told that yesterday. We were in a constructive, difficult, but absolutely diplomatic dialogue, discussion. We did convince our European partners as well that the form of this association treaty between Ukraine and the EU was not too good for us in the economic plane. We tried to convince Ukraine and Europe, but they told us directly that it was not the business of ours, and that a third country should not participate in relations between Ukraine and the EU. We tried to prove with papers, with documents, that it is not so, that Ukraine is in a free trade area on the former CIS space, and this damages our direct interests. But they said, no, you are not the participants of this process, we'll not speak with you. And afterwards, when we were able, through diplomatic, I highlight, methods, to convince Ukrainian leadership to at least have additional talks with Brussels, our Western partners then contributed to the coup d'etat, anti-constitutional coup d'etat in Ukraine, and that is solving disputable issues by force. And this way received reciprocal adequate answer. Why? I had mentioned that already. Because that damages the historical interests of the Russian people and Russian state in the region. And those people who prepared and committed such actions should have considered the implications of those. I repeat, there are many negative things in this situation, but I believe that it will serve as a warning and will prevent more serious conflicts and incidents to happen. As far as the position of India is concerned, we are grateful to the Indian leaders and the Indian people for their well-considered position, for the fact that the Indian leaders treated the problem by considering all the components, the historical and political situation, and was driven by this deep analysis, including the understanding of the great importance of Russian-Indian relations. We are grateful to them for that, and on my part, I had told this to the previous Prime Minister, and then I confirmed that, reiterated that with my phone conversation with the newly elected leader. We are going to fulfill all the arrangements and achieved in economy, in humanitarian cooperation, and of course in military technical cooperation as well. We have a lot of cooperation on many areas, and yesterday the representatives of the Indian business told us that the turnover with India is still quite modest, rather modest, and we'll have to develop that and expand it, but the prospects are huge, and we'll do everything to fully use this potential. Thank you. The next participant of our meeting is well known to you, Mr. Vladimirovich, Dylan Danishevsky, Associated Press, the US, and the Associated Press Agency celebrates its 170th anniversary in 2 years, and 35 years John was working for that. You're welcome, John. The floor is yours.
Greetings, Mr. President. It has been more than 2 decades since the end of the Soviet Union, and during that time, many roots and shoots of cooperation and contacts have grown between Russia and the United States. Russians are living and doing business in American law firms, banks, and oil companies are active here. The world has changed. But now we have this breach over Ukraine. Where do you think we're going? Is it the beginning of a new Cold War? Is that something that needs to be avoided now?
Well, I wouldn't like to think that it is a beginning of a new Cold War, because no one is interested in that, and I think it will not happen. The development of the crisis in Ukraine has not yet stopped. Well, I mean, the way I see it, and as I have explained it to you already, we really have a good toolbox of interaction with the US, but you see, I'd like to be frank with you, John. Those tools are good only when they are really used, applied. If we have some platforms for cooperation, for joint work, those platforms should not be used just for drinking tea or coffee together. These are the platforms to look for solutions and compromises. And if all the bonus of Russia is that she's allowed to sit next to someone and listen to what the others say, this is not the role which Russia can agree to. And I believe that this is the legal perspective the rightful perspective of this situation. We take into account the interests of our partners always. We always say yes, 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 but there are some red lines which we can't cross. And Ukraine and the Crimea are such a red line. I've said this already, but as you are a representative of one of the largest agencies, I'll repeat. Where are the guarantees that after this coup d'etat, another orange revolution that happened in Ukraine, where are the guarantees that Ukraine will not access to NATO tomorrow? No one, and I'd like to highlight that, no one has ever talked with us about that for the last 2 decades. I mean, meaningful dialogue. We've heard just one and the same phrase recorded on the tape. If every people has the right to determine the system of security where it wants to live, and it's none of your concern. Take the missile defense system. We made a lot of suggestions to find compromise, but the answer was still the same. It's not against you. But when we began to show documents which prove that it is against us, because all the missile defense systems which are located in certain areas are covering the launch pads of our ballistic missiles, then the dialogue stops. And the meaningful discussion does not exist. Where is the guarantee that in the Crimea there would not be any missile defense system had not the Crimean people voted for joining Russia? There were no guarantees. So on the one hand, you are right. We have really a lot of tools to look for compromise and dialogue, and to find solutions, to look for solutions. But those tools must be used, and not to serve the interests of just one country, but they must be used to look for compromise which would be acceptable for all the participants of this process, with the obligatory respect of the mutual interests of each other. Sorry, we are now 45 minutes on the air. Well, if the colleagues want that, we can continue. On the air. Yes. Anyway, on the air, not on the air, in the recording, as you wish. You're welcome. Well, now Spain. EFE agency, which is rightfully considered the largest agency in the Spanish world. José Antonio Leire, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, querido colega. Señor presidente, de sus palabras deduzco que con relación a las elecciones.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Entiende que no van a resolver demasiado la situación, es decir, que no tiene muchas esperanzas en que esto pueda servir para resolver la situación.
I believe that your countries will hardly rightfully solve the situation if we take into account the elections that will happen tomorrow. Those elections might cause new concerns in the West or some outbreaks in the east of Ukraine. What do you think? Can Russia face isolation, international isolation in this regard? And what do you personally feel? Can there be any isolation of Russia in regard with the elections? Can some political measures be taken against you? Is that possible? Well, in my action, I am guided only by the interests of the people of the Russian state. That's it. And the Russian people's interests demanded a reciprocal, adequate answer to the rude, forceful actions against the Russian interests. And our partners should have taken this into account in advance. As far as the isolation is concerned, well, first, we believe that we are right in this dispute. And legally, that is legally and honestly, I have explained my position and I have given references to the Kosovo president. As you well know, in Kosovo, the question of state independence was solved by the parliament of that territory. And in Crimea, the decision to announce the independence of state was based on the all-people referendum, which gave a question whether people want to remain in Ukraine or join Russia. And after an overwhelming majority, more than 90% of citizens living in the territory expressed their views on the referendum and said that they wanted to join the Russian Federation, only afterwards the Parliament of Crimea has decided to declare independence. I'm drawing your attention to the fact that the Crimean parliament, which took the decision, was formed on the basis of the Ukrainian law. It was absolutely legitimate. And it was formed before all the crises and coup d'etat in Ukraine. So the MPs and the parliament was formed, elected before that. It's a legitimate body and it had full legitimacy in taking such decisions. Of course, we could ignore all that and we could pretend that someone does not understand something or does not notice something, but the law and the right actually is on our side, and no one would convince me that even on the basis of our legal interests and rights and guided by the international law, we should change our position on this matter. That's the first remark. Second, I believe that the isolation of such a country as Russia is immaterial. It's impossible. And I believe you can analyze who and how treats the situation and who and how treats Russia in modern conditions. Yes, we do have great interest and turnover with the EU, with the US. Well, it's a bit smaller in the US, about $27 billion. But I believe that we could deal a lot of damage to each other. And when there's a difficult situation in the world economy, who needs this damage? You know, now we have a lot of people who have come to our forum, and people understand that our position is fair and just. If you have polls in Europe, I'm not sure that a lot of citizens of the European states would support their leaders. I believe that in Europe, many citizens would support our position. And in the end, people are the source of power. Well, as far as the consequences are concerned, they would be negative for everyone. They would lead European, Russian and global economy to such turbulence which is not of interest to anyone. And besides, of course, there could be damage if, for example, some crazy measures were taken. But I don't see any grounds for that. For example, a package of sanctions was adopted in connection with actions in Crimea. I believe that's not legal, but it has been taken. Now they are saying us, we are waiting for some actions from Russia on Ukraine as such. Which actions?
What have we done in the Ukraine? What can we be held accountable for? First, we heard that there were special divisions there. Then everyone realized that there were no special divisions. Now they're talking about Russian instructors working there. And then the international community found out that there were no instructors either. What is the problem? Do they want to serve their own interests? Their political and geopolitical interests? We are not going to do that. But what we want to do and are ready to do is to cooperate. We are ready to equal rights cooperation, and I suppose that in the majority of the European states, as well as in the United States, many citizens would stick to our position. And I suppose that authorities of most countries do understand the situation, and I hope that they are not committed to confrontation, and I hope that there is no foundation for that. The biggest Italian information agency